I ate so many egg noodles before this, so I'm about to have an egg explosion. Hello, and welcome back to Super Hell, aka the Mysteries Podcast, a show where two recovering Supernatural fans subject themselves to a rewatch, so no one else ever has to watch Supernatural again. My name is Ollie. I use any pronouns, and you can find me on social media at OllieFresh. It's fresh with a PH.
And my name is Klaudia. My pronouns are she, her, and you can find me on social media at Klaudia Says, K-A-L-U-D-I-A Says.
We have a special episode for y'all today.
Yes.
It's going to be departing a little bit from our regular rhythm, but...
Well, because it's a special week. Because
it is. Well, it's a special 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. So... season 16 of Supernatural, aka the Winchesters spinoff, is here.
Would you consider it season 0.5?
It's
the Winchesters is here. We're gonna talk about it in the latter half of this episode, so we're gonna still talk about the episode of Supernatural like we usually do in the first half, and then we're gonna share some of our thoughts and our predictions.
Yeah, about the meowification of John Winchester.
Which we predicted.
Yeah, I mean, it was clear that was happening.
Yeah,
but,
I know. I'm taking credit for it because I'm taking my W's where I can get them.
Yeah, and obviously because this deals with a lot of lore that we haven't got to yet in the show, like in our rewatch of the show, like we're not going to cover it too heavily as it's coming out. We're just gonna talk about the highlights as they come up. But we felt like this was an important week to cover the premiere of it because they have tried to do a spin-off of Supernatural so many times and it has not gone off the ground. So I felt this was a momentous time.
Yeah, well, and we'll get into it. But for now. Now, do we want to talk about the show itself, the main hubbub?
So we are in season 2. Season 2, episode 11 is called Playthings.
This is a very memorable one. I honestly thought this was in season 1, so I was like, I wonder when that episode's happening. And when it started, I was like so excited.
Yeah, and it's kind of meta also because in the episode they're like, oh, we haven't done one of these in a while, like a monster of the week haunted house kind of deal. There's not as much connected to the main plot, but there is for their character development, where it's these two decide to go on what seems like a regular hunt instead of going to therapy. So we open on a delivery truck that pulls up to this New England looking place called the Pierpont Inn. It's like a cozy little B&B, one might say.
I mean, to be fair, it's a lot more like, it's a weird mix between a cozy bed and breakfast and like a gothic mansion.
Yeah,
like, it's a very strange,
it's like a Tudor style house.
Yeah,
it's very weird.
Yeah, it's a Tudor style house, but the interior is not really.
Yeah, it's
giving Crimson Peak. If Crimson Peak took place, if Crimson Peak was also The Shining. Wow, I sound like a Supernatural writer. Let me see how many more references I can get in one sentence. Ghostbusters, Star Wars. Those are the only two things.
Classic rock.
Aerosmith.
The fact that we're not even exaggerating is so dark. So there's this single mother. Her name is Susan Thompson. She meets with the delivery guy to pick up some items that they're selling. And she's like, yeah, I'm closing down the inn. There's not a lot of like income coming in. So I have to sell it. And the guy's like, oh man, that's too bad. Whatever. He's like talking about how like his parents or whatever, like proposed there. Like his parents and his grandparents proposed there. It was very odd, very strange. I don't know if he's like a local or something.
Wouldn't it be really funny if your grandparents like got engaged somewhere? Or no, say your parents got engaged somewhere and you were like, babe, let's go to the hotel that my parents got engaged to each other at. Like,
it's so odd.
And then, no, because that is so strange and off-putting.
Yeah, I was like, okay. And so the woman, her daughter, whose name is Tyler, comes out and she's like, seems really disappointed that her mom is talking about how they're going to sell it. And she turns to this other little girl named Maggie, and they're talking, and then she goes into a room, and they're looking at a really big dollhouse, and the dollhouse looks exactly like the inn on the outside, and it has a bunch of dolls in it, and she takes one of the dolls and puts it in a chair. And then she puts some of them in the bed, and she's saying goodnight to them. She's like normal little girl stuff. And then she goes back and sees that the doll that she put in the chair, it's now empty. And she looks around the dollhouse, and then she finds that same doll lying at the bottom of the stairs with its head like twisted around, exorcist style. And then she hears like a scream outside her room, and it's her mother. And she runs out. Her mom is on the phone and talking to the police, and her mom is like, don't look, honey. Don't come down. Don't look. And the guy from the moving company who was coming to pick up the stuff that they were selling is laying on the ground with his head twisted all the way around, dead. And there's a doll lying next to him. And her mom is like, don't look, whatever. But she looks anyway. And then it's like supernatural.
We do fully see this dude's body like twisted around. It was very exciting. I was like, we love a head turned 180 degrees where it's not supposed to be.
Yeah,
I was very campy.
Yeah, it was wild that like they didn't show his head being twisted around. They just showed the aftermath, which is a little wild.
It was very much putting your sweatshirt on backwards and putting the hood over your face kind of situation is what it looked like.
So we cut to, we're in Peoria, Illinois with the boys. And there are missing posters of Ava Wilson. She was the other child who has been dealt demon blood situation, who was like, in the last episode was like, hey Sam, I think you're gonna die, comes to help him, and then he's like, I'll handle this, and he sent her home. And then at the end of the episode they went to her home, and she was missing and her fiance was dead. So she's a missing psychic now, basically. They have missing posters all over, and Sam has clearly been trying to look for her. And Sam and Dean are talking. They're like, okay, we haven't been able to find anything. We've been talking to all of our contacts. They searched through federal, state, and local information. They're not finding anything. And they say it's been like a month. And Sam is like, so I talked to Ellen, and she said that there's this job at this place called the Pierpoint Inn. And Dean's like, isn't your normal thing that you like kind of lose your mind and you get kind of depressed if you don't like solve it and help the person, whatever? And he's like, okay, well, Dad would have wanted us to keep like saving people, and I'm gonna figure it out, but I shouldn't like stop, saving people in the meantime. And Dean's like, that's kind of emotionally mature of you. Okay, sure. Okay, we'll go do a regular job. I love when they have to justify them like having a regular episode with all that. They do that so much in this show.
I agree. I think when they're like, oh, it's a job. They're like contractors.
Yeah.
They get paid.
They decided to take the job. They're like, okay, we'll call Ellen. We'll take the job, whatever. And at one point, I don't know if it's Sam or Dean, or it's like, yeah, like there's been all these people who've been dying in this inn, like this woman.
Well, they said it was like 2 people over the course of like a month, I think.
Yeah, like a month. He's like, there was a woman who drowned in a bathtub, and then this delivery man, his head was twisted all the way around. He was like, this seems to be like our kind of case,
Yeah, and he does specifically say like, because Sam says that, and Dean's like, well, that's just like 2 people dying. Like, it's bad, but it's not like necessarily our thing. And Sam's like, well, this one guy's head was twisted around 180 degrees, which is not usual. So maybe we should just like go see what's up.
And Dean's like, oh, I hope the demon didn't get his hands on Ava. And Sam's like, we'll figure it out. We'll save them both. It's very, I'm like, guys, you don't have to justify it that hard. So this inn is in Cornwall, Connecticut. So they drove all the way from Illinois to Connecticut. They arrive, and Dean's like, oh, this place is like kind of nice, even though it's like an old ass building. And he's like, we haven't done an old school haunted house kind of place in a while. And as they're going in, Sam notices a pattern on like a planter outside. And this is where we have to once again have a discussion about supernatural and cultural appropriation.
Let's go. Supernatural really does not know how to stop.
Yeah. They see what Supernatural says is a hoodoo symbol outside on a planter. And Dean goes, this seems like kind of a white bread kind of place to have hoodoo. He's like,
it's like, Dean,
what the fuck?
No, he is going to hell, I fear.
To be fair, they are in, like, Connecticut, and he's like, yeah, it's as white as it gets here. Well, why are there hoodoo symbols? And it's like, okay, I guess that. But
I do like the idea of Dean reading the census to try to be like, now what's the demographic of this area before we go places, just so I can make sure that I'm speaking accurately.
I'm like, okay. It's very this whole sequence actually is so much. So yeah, this whole episode there are going to be references to hoodoo, where we once again have to go, Supernatural, stop playing with things you don't understand.
I will say, other than that, like, it is actually, like, I think a very good episode.
Yeah.
So it's like, then they're like, we're gonna say something we don't understand and have not researched as much as we should. And it's like, oh, cool. Like, and I think the other thing too, we'll get there, but there is some really interesting commentary that could be made about some things that'll come up later. Yeah. But it's like they don't quite make it there, so it just seems cheesy and low-key racist, you know?
Which I feel like has happened before in episodes we've talked about before. Yeah. It's like, you're almost there.
You're so close.
You've just used it as, like,
set dressing.
Yeah, set dressing, which is not good.
Yeah.
So they go in, and Susan, the woman who is the who is the like owner of the hotel, the single mother, she is white. Everyone in this episode is white. We're just putting that out there. And her kids are white. So they go in and they go up to the counter and they're like, hi, can we have a room? And she like makes a comment and she's like, oh, like, you guys might be like some of our last customers. And they're like, oh, what happened? And she's like, yeah, we've had some weird stuff happening. And she's like, but, you know, you guys seem like the type to stay here anyway. And they're like, what does that mean? And she's like, oh, like, aren't you into antiquing? And I was like, is this just the early 2000s way of saying somebody's gay?
Is he into antiquing?
Is he?
That's the early 2000s friend of Dorothy right there.
Literally. But and then it gets worse though, because then she goes, so like one king bed, right? And again, we've had this issue before in hotels.
I will say, good for her on being progressive.
Yeah, it's like 2007. Like, okay.
Yeah, good on her. And she was very chill about it too. Like, she was very like, okay, yeah, let's get it. King bed.
She's in New England in 2007. Like,
even so, I'll take an ally.
Ally. But here's the thing. If we should actually have a running counter at this point. This is at least number 3 on screen where they have confused them for being a couple. And mainly, I think, because Dean is usually the one talking, and I'm like, I fear that he's the gay one. So they're like, are you guys a couple? And they're like, oh, no, we're not. We're brothers. No. But then they're still like, but you seem to be really into antiquing. Because the elderly bellhop comes up behind them and is like, oh, you guys are here for antiquing, right? And I'm like, wow, is this like, are they being profiled?
No, because the woman and the bellhop, like, both of them are the people, and everybody knows them, the people who are just a little bit too excited to be allies.
Yeah.
So they end up saying things that are like, you know, they don't mean it, but they are low-key homophobic, and you're like, oh wow, thank you. Oh, great. Thank you so much. We don't have to keep talking about this, you know?
Yeah. And here's the thing, is this is not the only instance of Dean being a little gay in this episode.
Dean, girl.
Yeah, he's in this episode especially, he is not beating the allegations.
No, he is fucking not.
So here's the thing. He is so like flustered by it. Instead of just being like, oh no, sorry, we're brothers or whatever. He's like,
which Sam says. Sam is literally like, oh no, sorry, we're like, whatever, it's not a big deal. And Dean's like, This is the worst day of my life.
And you're like, interesting.
And it's not even in like an angry way where you're like, oh, he's mad because, oh, people think I'm gay. He's more like, he just looks insecure. I'm like, Supernatural, what are you trying to get us to think? Because like, I try to gauge myself and say like, am I reading too much into this? And there's definitely times where I am. But this situation, like the way it is acted, I'm like, what am I supposed to think?
Jensen,
like,
I don't know what you were doing.
No, literally.
So they meet the bellhop. His name is Sherwin. And they see the two little girls go running past. There's Tyler. There's a little girl Tyler, and then there's a little girl Maggie, and they're running past and they're playing whatever. And the mom Susan, she's like, oh my god, so sorry, like, you know, all over the place. And so Sherwin, who is the bellhop, like shows them to their rooms, and he's telling them about the hotel, and he's like, yeah, it's really sad that it's closing. Like, my parents worked here, I grew up working here. We used to have a lot of famous people stay here, like vice presidents and all this kind of stuff. And you know, because we've just had less guests coming in, you know, we're gonna have to close. And then they get to their room, and he like, you know, he holds out his hand for like a tip because like he brought their bags and everything, and Dean like doesn't go to tip him, and he's like, you're really gonna leave like an old man like high and dry or whatever? And Dean's like, fine. I was like, Dean, you don't even earn your own money, you steal it through credit card fraud. You could at least tip the fucking bellhop.
Give a guy $1. Dean Winchester's libertarian is showing.
Yeah, I was like, Dean, what the fuck?
Dean Winchester is the person who would have like a printout that's like looks like $100 bill on the top, but then you look at it and it says like a Bible verse on it.
Okay, that is ironic.
I think it's hilarious though. I just like the idea of him being like, oh yeah, here's your tip, and then you're like, oh wow, this is really generous. Okay, no, all right then.
Yeah, Sam would never. Sam would always tip accordingly. So they settle in, and Sam's like, here's all the people who have died in the inn. And it seems like they're all like related to the closure of the hotel. Like, there was the woman who was the woman was the realtor. This other guy came, they were selling stuff off. And he's like, okay, so it's got to be someone who doesn't want it to close. And they're like, well, there's the Sherwin, the bellhop. It seems like he's lived here his whole life. Like, maybe he doesn't want it to close, that kind of thing. And so they're like, okay, we're going to go investigate more. And they're looking around, and they see another one of these hoodoo symbols, again, on some furniture. And they're like, now what the fuck is going on here? So then they see Susan, and who's the owner, and she has all these fucking creepy antique dolls. It's very Haunted Doll Watch. This episode is brought to you by the McElroy Brothers Haunted Doll Watch. Because this is like her office or her bedroom, and it's full of like haunted dolls. It's
okay. You know what? I will say, first of all, we don't know if the dolls are haunted or not. Second of all,
one of them is.
Perhaps I'm gonna come out. I'll say it. I don't understand why people think dolls are creepy.
Okay, I mean, I understand dolls are creepy.
I understand from a fundamental level of like, oh, it's supposed to look like a human, and it's not like the uncanny valley. I get it. But like, they're just dolls. Come on, guys.
Many dolls? It was a lot of dolls.
Well, I had a lot of dolls as a child, and no one was like, are you possessed?
So did I, but like, I don't know. There's something about the China dolls and a lot of them that's very scary.
It does not bother me. I just think everyone needs to calm down. And doll collectors, I stand with you, because you guys are stigmatized every day. Antique doll collectors.
The Monster High fan.
Okay, and what is the problem with that? And what is the problem with Monster High? Come on. No. I want to hear it. What's your problem? Yeah, that's what I thought. You don't have anything to say. Because Monster High is amazing. And it has more representation than all of Supernatural.
Go watch Monster High instead, actually. The new animated series is coming soon.
Let's go.
Anyways, so they see all these antique dolls, and one of them happens to have its head twisted around like the guy. Tyler, the little girl, she walks in the room, and they're like, hey, what did this? like, did you twist it around? And the little girl walks in and she's like, no, I found it like that.
Yeah. Sam is like, it's actually this very like sweet little Sam moment, because Sam's like, oh, hey, Tyler, I see your doll's broken. I see you broke your doll. Do you want me to fix it? And she's like, I didn't break it. I don't know. I did not break it. I found it like that.
And she's like, yeah, I would never break it because my grandma, Rose, would get mad if she found out that her dolls were broken. Like, all these dolls are hers. And Susan is like, yeah, my mother is sick. And they're like, oh, can we go see her? And they're like, and she gets like really defensive. She's like, no.
Yeah. And specifically they are like, we want to see her so we can talk about her antique dolls, because Sam loves antique dolls. He loves them. Dean literally goes, Sam, my brother, he loves antique dolls. He loves to dress them up. He loves looking at them, loves brushing their hair, just loves dolls so much. And Sam's like, yep, that's true. Yep, you're right. Yeah. And they're like, can we please talk to your mother? Can you please talk to the grandma? And she's like, absolutely fucking not.
Yeah, I do fear this is another like slight homophobia moment, because like this is how they get in the room, because they see the dolls behind them, and then Dean decides to be like, yeah, my brother, who's like I don't know, 22-year-old man, he's really into dolls. and so she's like, no, these two weird guys who are really into dolls, I will not let you see my 70-year-old grandmother. Like, it's, and he really like goes into it, like he's very like, oh yeah, Sam really likes it, and you're like,
no, this is like at least 30 seconds of Dean listing all the things that Sam loves about dolls. And I'm like, okay, give it a rest. I know you're offended that you got called gay earlier, but you need to calm down.
I fear it's overcompensating.
Which Sam literally says, we'll get to that part, that conversation.
So, Susan gets very defensive though, and she's like, no, she's not taking any visitors. And so they're walking out and they're like, okay, so Rose might be a witch doctor who knows hoodoo, and who doesn't want her place to be sold. Great. Awesome. And we're like, I don't know. That doesn't really seem right. She seems a bit white for that. So we cut to Susan is talking with like another realtor who has come from the company that bought the hotel, and she's like, oh, like what kind of renovations are they gonna do when the sale goes through? And he's like, oh, we didn't tell you, like we're just gonna demolish it and start from the ground up. And we cut to Tyler, the little girl. She's playing with her dolls, and they're playing with a tea set. They're having a little tea party, and there is a doll sitting on a bed in exactly the same position as the guy from the sales company, who now we see is in his own room. And we see a door behind the doll starts to open, and at the same time they cut to a door opening behind the man in his room. And then suddenly Tyler, the little girl, suddenly turns around. She looks at the dollhouse and sees that the doll is now hanging from its neck from the ceiling fan. And then of course we cut to the same thing has now happened to the guy in his room. It's quite dark. And
it's a little bit a little spooky. It's actually a really like interesting sequence too. Like, yeah, I like the way this was edited.
So after we see this man die, we cut to Dean and Sam. They're in their room and they're sitting there debriefing whatever, and Dean is like, once again, Dean's like, it's really crazy that every time we go somewhere they think we're gay.
And like Sam,
have a whole conversation about it.
Sam is also such a little bitch in this moment, because he goes, well, Dean, you're kind of butch. I think people just think you're overcompensating. And Dean looks like so offended by it, but not in the like, oh my god, I think I'm like, in a way that he's like does not know how to respond. I'm like, are you trying to tell me like
Dean is having a realization?
He looks like a deer in the headlights. It's embarrassing that this show was like, no, he's not gay, but then put shit like this in. What are you doing?
Yeah, it's like, you could have made that homophobic joke and then kept going, but they're like, let's have a whole conversation and have Dean look like he's like thinking about his whole life, like, And Sam wasn't even saying it in a mean way. He was like, you're kind of butch and it does seem like you're like, he wasn't even being that mean. And you're like,
unfortunately,
what's all this about?
He was just being matter of fact, because he is correct. Because we also do know canonically, like, a lot of Dean's like masculine presentation is like an act.
Yeah.
A lot of it is him trying to, like, overdo it because he has some daddy issues. But it's also, like, this scene perplexes me.
Yeah. I'm like, why is this here? And why is this here? And as they are talking, you start to hear an ambulance, I think. And they look outside, and there's the police. There's an ambulance that's carrying away the body of this guy. And they're like, oh, this is dark. This is so dark. So Dean's like, okay, I'm going to go down. I'm going to go talk to Susan. He goes down to see her, and she's like, if you want to leave, like, I totally get it. And he's like, no, I don't scare easily. It's fine. And he comes back, and he starts to, like, tell Sam the situation. And Sam is, like, answering like a belligerent child. And he's like, what the fuck? And he turns around, and Sam is, like, sitting in the chair, drunk off his ass. And he's like, this is not normal Sam behavior.
Also to say, this did take, like, Dean did go down and, like, look around. This wasn't like he was gone for, like, 30 seconds and then came back and was like, did you drink the entire bar cart? What?
Yeah. He's like, what the fuck? And so Sam starts to be like, I need to save everybody. I need to save these people. I need to save, like, clearly he feels guilt at the fact that he is turning into some kind of monster.
And he also, I mean, a lot of it too is he's like, I couldn't save this guy. I couldn't save Ava. The more people I can save, the less, I'm repenting for what I'm becoming. And, like, if I can save people, then it's a good thing. But, like, everyone around me dies. Dean, you need to kill me if I start becoming something I'm not. And Dean's like, okay, I can't do this right now. Can you please? You're drunk.
And he's like, promise me, promise. And he's like, okay, I promise. And then makes him go to sleep. And he's like, he's not gonna remember any of this in the morning. And you're like, Sam, what the fuck? And so Dean is like, okay, I'm gonna go and ask some people some questions because he's drunk off his ass. And he goes down to the hotel bar area. And it's just Sherwin, the bellhop, who's there. And he starts talking to him.
Who is, like, I know we said it before, but Sherwin is, like, an old-ass man. Like, he's, like, at, like, late 60s at the youngest.
Yeah. And Dean's like, oh, I bet you really have some stories, whatever. And he's like, yeah. And they see a photo of this little girl. And he's like, oh, who is that? And he's like, oh, that's Rose. That's Susan's mother. And he's like, and he sees there's a woman with her. Rose is sitting on her lap. And he's like, who is that? And he was like, oh, that was her nanny. And he's like, oh, shit. And he's like, oh, that was her nanny. Her name is Marie. She basically raised Rose because more than her own mother. And we see that Rose is a little white girl and Marie is black, and she's wearing a symbol that is just like the hoodoo symbols around the house.
It's on like an amulet.
Yeah, and it's on like an amulet. And Dean's like, oh, I see what's happening now. There's a lot to unpack in that little sequence there. So much.
This is exactly what I'm talking about when I say, like, it almost seemed like they thought they had something in doing commentary of, like, it was the, like, because there is commentary in saying, like, in a lot of wealthy upper class America, like, white wealthy children were not raised by their parents. They were raised by their caregivers, who a lot of the time were black women. And I think that there is, like, a really interesting commentary there. But Supernatural just doesn't quite deliver on that.
Yeah.
And it doesn't, like, deliver on, like, the that kind of the nuance that goes into that conversation, and then just kind of be like, oh, look, she had a black nanny who taught her how to do magic. Like,
you're like, okay,
girl, what?
All right, thanks for that, I guess. But it tips him off about what might be happening here. We cut to the next morning, and we have Sam is literally leaning over the toilet. He's like, I have the worst hangover ever. And Dean's like, hey, so I'm going to get you a hangover remedy. Also, by the way, Rose, the grandmother, had a nanny. And he says, she's like, oh, she had a Creole nanny who clearly practiced and has the same symbol. And I was like, and how did he know that she was Creole? But I guess he's just guessing.
Maybe he
did some research.
Maybe he asked Sherwin.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe he asked him about it.
I don't
but
know.
Regardless, I was like,
so
I love he's the confidence.
Dean, okay. But you know, maybe he's more culturally informed than we think he is. Spoiler alert, he's not. We know his preferences in porn. That's all I'm gonna say. That's all I'm gonna say. When we want to, he is not an unproblematic king. He is extremely problematic.
He's multifaceted.
He's something else. So they're like, okay, we have to go talk to the grandmother. And they decide to sneak into the apartment area of the family. And I'm like, really? You guys are gonna go sneak in and startle an old woman? Okay. And they're like, okay, we got this. And they go up to like this attic room, and there's this old woman. She's in a wheelchair, and she's like unable to respond to them. She's clearly nonverbal at this point. And they're like, oh shit. It seems like she's had a stroke, so she can't talk. And there's definitely something wrong with her. And then Susan walks in and is like, what the fuck are you guys doing here? It's just like, can you leave? I'm gonna call the cops if you don't leave like right now. And they're like, okay. So they run out. And it cuts to Susan telling her daughter to be like, have you packed it all? And Tyler's like, no, I don't want to. Maggie doesn't want us to leave. And Susan gets angry at her, and she's like, you're getting too old to have an imaginary friend. Maggie isn't real. Whatever.
Which is a huge shock to us, the viewer, because we've just been seeing Tyler playing with this other little girl, and they're both dressed like very similarly too, so it's like you just assume that they had two kids. Yeah. And there's also a point earlier where Tyler like mentioned Maggie when Sam and Dean were nearby, like they heard her talking, so they're like, everyone was under the impression that there were just two little girls who lived here.
She turns to Maggie, who is clearly not an imaginary friend, and Maggie's like, I don't really like her. And you're like, uh-oh.
Her being Tyler's mother.
Yeah, Tyler's mother, Susan. So we cut to Susan. She's carrying boxes out of the house to put into the car. And Tyler is up playing in the playroom in the dollhouse again. And the mother notices that there's like the wind is picking up. And it keeps cutting back and forth between Tyler upstairs looking at the replica of the outside where there is a play set and a little playground, and there's a swing that starts swinging back and forth, and a seesaw that starts moving and stuff. And then it cuts to outside where the same thing is happening, and Susan is like, oh, what the fuck? And more stuff starts moving, and Susan's like, oh shit, and she starts to back up, and then she notices that the car behind her starts moving and it's gonna hit her, and she starts to run, and Sam jumps out from like, I don't know, a bush, and like knocks her aside and saves her. And she's like, thank you, what the fuck? And they're like, yeah, so there's been all this stuff occurring for the past few months. Clearly it is not because of hoodoo. That is definitely a ghost. That is some spirit shit happening. And they're like, yeah, we don't have time to explain. And she's like, and they think, and they're like, okay, well, it's not the mother doing this if it's a spirit. And they're like, so what happened to your mother? And she's like, yeah, so she had a stroke a month ago. And they're like, oh, wait a minute. It was Rose, the grandmother, who put up all those symbols on the furniture. And then she had a stroke. And then that's when people started dying because she couldn't fend them off with magic anymore.
Like she was using hoodoo to protect from this spirit.
So that they're like, okay, Susan, you need to take your employees, you need to take your daughters, and you need to go. And Susan's like, what do you mean? I only have one daughter. Her name is Tyler. And they're like, doesn't Tyler have a sister named Maggie? And Susan's like, no, that's her imaginary friend. And they're like, oh shit, that's got to be the ghost that's haunting the hotel. Yeah. And then Susan's like, wait a minute, Maggie, oh my God. So my mother, Rose, had a sister named Margaret that like she drowned in the pool at the hotel that was their former estate. And they're like, oh shit. So They search for Tyler, the little girl, and it's like a separate building. It looks kind of like a greenhouse where the old hotel pool is, and it's like covered for the winter or whatever, even though it's indoors, but probably because they're closing the hotel. And
yeah, like it has like a plastic cover on it that's like see-through,
yeah.
like a clear plastic cover.
But it's like on a lower level, and the entrance is on a higher level, and so like the little girl and then the ghost Maggie are like they're on the other side of the railing, like, which if they just like let go, she would like drop into the pool. And the ghost Maggie is like, yeah, so if you jump, you can stay with me forever. And she's like, well, why can't you come with me and mommy? And she's like, I can't leave. And she's like, are you sure? Is it gonna hurt? And she's like, no, it's not gonna hurt. So she's a ghost suicide baiting this child. POV, your aunt is a ghost suicide baiting you to jump into a pool.
Great aunt.
Yeah, sorry. Your great aunt is suicide baiting you to jump into a pool. She's Javering her, if you will.
I like homicide by Javert.
Realizing that this is what's to happen, Sam, Dean, the mom, they're like running to the pool. They're like, oh my god, we can't get in to the indoor pool place. They're like trying to break down doors, whatever. Sam takes like a planter and like throws it through a window to try to get in. And they're screaming the little girl's name. They're like, oh my god, please don't jump, please don't jump. And Maggie, the ghost, turns around and sees them coming in and pushes the little girl. And you're like, damn, this ghost is powerful. She can touch things, she can move things. And it's just a pool cover, so it immediately like folds in and she starts to drown.
She does also note that she can't swim, like, just as an aside. So she's not, and it's like a semi deep pool. Like, it looks like it's probably like about like 6 to 9 feet. I bet.
It's like a lap pool, so it's not like there's a kiddie end or anything. And finally Sam like throws him through the window and he gets in and he jumps him into the pool to go save her. And
there's also this like really haunting shot. Like this is probably like a 1.5 minute long sequence, maybe a little longer. Like, so we see Tyler like struggling in the water, and then we see her like go still, and she's just kind of floating in the water when Sam gets in and like pulls her out. And like it's a very chilling sequence because the sound is like dimmed, like the audio is not like it's lined up like, on purpose. Like,
it's not like slow-mo. It's like sort of supposed to be the same thing. It's supposed to be like very like, it's very weird, and like of him like literally pulling her out of the water and stuff. It's and very she's like scary.
Yeah, and she's like limp.
Yeah.
So it's like she's passed out.
Yeah.
So it's just very like, it's very, I feel like in horror, like there's a lot of ways that the horror genre deals with like children. And I think like showing children in peril is inherently very scary.
Yeah.
So like this is a very like chilling scene where you see Sam pull this limp little girl out of the water. You like don't know if she's gonna make it or not.
Yeah. And also like her and the ghost, they're wearing the same clothes. So like it's supposed to be like reminiscent. It's very scary. And the ghost of Maggie is like hovering above her in the pool. And right before she's pulled out of the water, we hear Rose's voice, I guess, telepathically like call her name, call to Maggie, and she like kind of goes like, what? And then she disappears. So like they get Tyler out, whatever, and they're like, where's the ghost? And she's just disappeared. And the little girl wakes up, and then we cut to Rose, the grandmother, in the attic, and we see Maggie, the little ghost girl, who's like, okay, yeah, she's like, so you'll go with me, whatever. And like Rose can't talk, but she's like, okay, like so that I'm not like, I won't have to be alone anymore, and you still love me, whatever. It's like really sad.
Yeah, she does say, I think verbatim, her words are, you kept me away for so long, I was starting to think you didn't love me anymore.
And like, oh.
It's really like, it's weirdly, this episode ends in like a weirdly touching way.
Yeah. She kind of accepts this deal. Rose dies of another stroke. And And Sam and Dean and Susan, they're like, okay, we're going to go get grandma and we're going to leave. And then Susan walks in, sees her mother is dead. And Sam and Dean like run in and they're like, oh my God, what happened? They're like, this had to be the ghost. And so they're taking the little girl away, and they're like, thank you to Sam and Dean. They're getting in a cab or whatever. This is another moment of, okay, all right, Supernatural, where Susan, the mom, hugs Sam because he's the one who saved the little girl. And then Dean makes another comment of like, you could have gotten some MILF action. And I was like, Dean, please read the room. I know you're overcompensating, but please.
It's so dark. Imagine being like, thank you so much for saving my daughter. And then some jackass is like, oh, I think she wanted you, bro. Like,
I would kill Dean. He deserves it every single time. And Sam's like, what the fuck? And they walk away and they drive away, and then the ending is just the spirits of Maggie and now Rose as a little girl playing alone in the house. And you're like, they're still there. And they do ask the little girl, they're like, so is Maggie gone? She's like, yeah, I would see her. Like, she's gone. So yeah, they just leave the ghost there, which never really happens.
And they're just like two little girls playing together. Like, they're in the room with all the dolls and they're just like playing. And it's like a very like sweet ending, because it shows like Rose has regressed. Like, now she is also a ghost as a girl.
Yeah, and it's weird because you're like, that they're gonna knock this house down, and where's all the stuff gonna go? And like, the little girls are still gonna be there. It's very wild.
I mean, I think that it's kind of almost like a resolution of like, now she can have someone there with her when the house goes, if that makes sense. Like, I hate to say like, oh, they're gonna like die together, because that's not quite what I mean, but I think you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. In the trivia for this episode, this is the first time that Dean calls Sam Sasquatch, which is Jensen Ackles' real life nickname for Jared Padalecki. I forgot about that.
That is so hateful. That's hateful to Sasquatch real. Any final thoughts on this episode?
Yeah. I like the like traditional horror references. Obviously, we got The Shining. I think there's a Psycho reference in there. Like, love all that. I like it back to a traditional episode. I think without the framing of cultural appropriation, this would be a really good episode.
I agree completely. And I think season 2, I forget sometimes, like, season 2 is a really strong season in terms of storytelling and in terms of like actual, like, the acting's all really good. You can tell their budget was increased. So you have a lot of really, really good parts. But then they decided, let's talk about Black people. And it's like, well, maybe don't do that.
Yeah, like if you don't have the capacity, maybe don't.
Yeah. I'm like, listen, they did pretty decently with the racist truck episode from season 1. And then they said, what if we do that again, but worse?
Yeah. And you're like, okay, all right.
Yeah.
But otherwise, it's an interesting episode. And the first time I think that we ever get to see Sam drunk off his ass.
Yeah.
Which doesn't happen that many times.
Another thing, too, is when Sam and Dean are driving away in this episode, Dean's like, oh, well, are you feeling better now that we've solved this case? And Sam is like, well, yeah, but it doesn't change anything about what we talked about. And Dean was like, well, you were so drunk when we had that conversation. And he's like, yeah, but you weren't, and you promised.
And you're like,
checkmate.
Oh, that's so...
Sam is like, I was a lawyer not because I knew the law very well, but because I was good at arguing. That's why I wanted to be a lawyer. I'm good at winning an argument.
And Dean's like, really? Do I have to follow up on that? I was really just trying to make you go to bed.
Yeah, because you were so fucked up, dude. Yeah. It's like, we get it, like, this episode has a very good balance of like the mystery itself, the interpersonal relationships between Sam and Dean, and the setting up future events.
Yeah.
Like, it has a very good balance of those elements. So I think that this is, like, a standout episode. And also the direction, I think, is really good.
Yeah.
Like, this is just a good episode if it wasn't for the not good part. on this?
Ready to begin?
Are we ready to get into it? Guys.
Oh, guys.
Guys. It is 2022. There is more Supernatural content. Dean Winchester's back and better than ever, allegedly. So let's talk about the Winchesters. So I don't know.
Spoilers for later seasons of Supernatural. We get into their family lore.
And I will also say that we are not going to talk about this episode like we do the rest of Supernatural. This is going to be more of our like post-watch commentary. So like I'm not telling you to go watch the Winchesters. This is just our reaction to it though. So we're not going to be like, here's what happens next like we normally would.
Because I'm going to be honest, the plot is not it.
It did not
so you're not missing anything.
Yeah, this is so fun fact. Claudia was in town. So we actually got to watch this episode together in person. Normally we record over Zoom.
Mel to watch it with us.
We did force my partner Mel to also watch it, who has seen not very much Supernatural. Very exciting. So we got to watch it together, and this was a couple days after it had come out. So we were like, okay, it seems like people are reacting in the way Supernatural fans do. So it's like, oh, it's hard to say if it's like a positive reaction or if people are just excited for more content. Because I think at this point, like, knowing Supernatural fans, they're not expecting it to be good. They're just expecting it to have their little guy in it.
Who is Destiel, and he is not there.
He is not there. Not yet. Listen, I have a theory. I will say, here starts our discussion on the Winchesters. Let's start with the elephant in the room. What's going on with Dean? Jensen Ackles has said, like, things are not getting retconned. So just, this is going to make sense eventually. So we see Dean at the end of the episode. He's like, I'm trying to write down stuff about my family. And it's like, well, where are you? Because my theory is that this is in heaven. And Dean's like, I'm going on a little heaven road trip because I'm bored and I'm waiting for Sam to get here. Because he does say in the episode, while I wait for you, I'm going to keep on picking the music. And I was like, oh, that's just like... I
forgot that he said, while I wait for you.
No, exactly. And I'm like,
oh.
It is because I'm telling you, it's while he's in heaven. Sam is not there yet. And he's like, well, I'm kind of bored. So I'm going to start learning about my parents, ?
And but also, so, spoiler alert, canonically we do know that both of his parents are in heaven, which is knowing that John Winchester goes to heaven is what sent me into the fucking stratosphere. I was like, he could just ask his parents what happened.
Fuck them. He's not doing that. He does not want to talk to them. He's finally unpacked all of his trauma and he's like, no, I can't do this.
Isn't it in the next episode that we were going to talk about where Dean was like, actually, our dad was kind of a dick. And I'm like, yeah, growth.
Yeah. No, that wasn't this episode.
Was it?
Yeah, because Sam was like, Dad was already telling you had to kill me if...
You're right. So in the episode that we just talked about of Supernatural, when Sam and Dean are having their little conversation where Sam is like drunk off his ass, he's like, Dad told you to kill me if I do something, whatever. And Dean's like, and you want me to do what Dad says? That sounds like kind of a dick move. And I'm like,
yeah, he's like, cause Dad sucks. Like,
and I was like, Dean, that's really big growth for you. You used to be the one who was like, we have to do what Dad says.
No, it's big growth. And then in the Winchesters, he's like, my dad, he was so slay.
And you're like, also, no, he wasn't.
Because Jensen Ackles in the... I will say this, Jensen Ackles in the Winchesters, he is speaking in a tone that I believe only whales and like deep water fish can hear. Because he is speaking so deep. He's like, I'm here to... I'm like, what are you saying? Please speak up.
It's because his voice has been permanently damaged by doing the Dean voice for so many years.
This is like, okay, no, because I think that the Dean... Jensen Ackles' Dean voice should fight with Ariana Grande's Cat Valentine voice.
No.
And they could come together and form one normal voice.
Oh, this is dark. But yeah, so the whole thing that started to figure out about the Winchesters, and they've like teased some stuff online of like, oh, when you get to episode 13, you'll find out like where this fits or whatever, is that like Dean is the one telling the story. And knowing that, I'm just like, okay, but John Winchester sucks. And that's the whole reason I cannot get behind this series, is that it's like, we already knew Mary Winchester was Slay, because of later things that happen in Supernatural that we find out about her and her family. Finding out that they're trying to make John Winchester Slay it made me feel violent and hateful.
It's also funny because, like, one of the big things is I know Jensen has said, like, oh, this is not going to retcon anything. And I'm not going to be the person who tries to jump down the throat and be like, oh, well, this breaks continuity, blah, blah, blah. Because, like, if he says that, then I'm going to trust him on this. And I'm going to trust that, like, that it's going to get fixed. But it's like saying, like, oh, their grandfather was a member of the Men of Letters on John's side. And John was a member of the Men of Letters. Like, I'm like, this is some alternate universe. Something is happening here. It better be, because if not, that is deeply upsetting and strange.
For our listeners who don't know about the Men of Letters, I don't know what fucking season it is. Season 10. Like, later on.
I think it's season 9 or 10.
Yeah, I think they got sick of, like, putting them in different motels. So they were like, what if they had a bunker that they just went back to? Surprise, your family was a part of a secret society that were, like, hunter Freemasons. And we're just gonna add this lore in here. And it was on his mom's side of the family. And
the Campbells were in this secret society of hunters, and then they're like, oh, so true, so now we have this home base. But now they're like, oh, well, your dad was also a member.
Yeah.
Girl, what?
And you're like, huh? What? And so the whole time I'm watching this, I'm like, so clearly the dad's memory is going to get wiped. Oh my God. John Winchester is going to get Donna Noble.
But
not
also,
clickbait.
The other thing, too, is that Mary's memory would also have to get wiped.
Unless she didn't, and she just didn't tell her husband.
That is kind of hilarious for being like, he's like, I just have this horrible headache and, like, patches of time are missing. She's like, don't worry about it, baby girl.
No, and literally as we were watching this, we were like, so is that why he becomes, like, kind of an asshole? It's like how we're like, oh, why are boomers such horrible parents? Oh, it's because of the lead poisoning.
Yeah.
For John Winchester, it is both the lead poisoning and the fact that all of his memories of being a hunter do get erased.
Yeah, it's like John, because John also, like, in the show, first of all, I will say the actor who plays John is, like, doing a really good job. Like,
he's the best part of the show, I think.
He is giving the best performance. Because, like, I'm going to say it now. I don't know if it's just that the material they're working with for the dialogue is not good, or if it's the direction. I don't want to blame the actors entirely, but the acting, I don't think it's great.
To me, it's giving Star Wars prequels, and that they're being given nothing. So what they're giving is as much as they can give.
Yeah, and it's like the direction's also kind of weird, and the editing. There's a part where you can clearly hear that Mary was in the middle of a sentence, and then they cut it to another take of her in the middle of that same sentence. So it's like 2 takes of the same sentence, and you can clearly hear when they cut it.
Yeah,
and it's
very weird.
It's really strange, and it's like, you know, I know it's a CW production. I know it doesn't have a multi-billion-dollar budget, but, like,
yeah,
like, guys, come on.
Yeah.
You couldn't have had her come into the booth and re-record that one more time.
Yeah. That being said, the actor playing John Winchester, he has said in interviews that he's, like, a fan of the show, and he's, like, studied them a lot. And not only did they get an actor who I do believe looks a lot like Sam.
He looks a lot like Sam. He also has, like a not terrible resemblance to Jeffrey Dean Morgan. Like, not great, but, like,
yeah,
you can, if you suspend your disbelief, then you can be fine with it.
He's a white man. Like,
yeah, close enough.
But I do think, like, either they picked somebody who acts just like them, or he's a really good actor in that, like, his mannerisms, especially since I've been rewatching early seasons of Supernatural where he's supposed to be about the same age as, like, Sam especially. I'm like, oh, wow. And he's also, like, 7 feet tall, just like Sam and Dean. And they're like, his mannerisms are a lot like him, which it makes it very hateful, because I'm like, canonically Sam is a nice person and John is not.
Yeah.
So I don't like this.
And a lot of it too is also kind of like in the original Supernatural, I think a lot of it is framed as like, well, John was in Vietnam and then, like, it fucked him up and then he was kind of an asshole. But it's like, John has just come back from Vietnam in this show, and he's pretty, he's, obviously, I think it's something that's going to get dissected later on, but, like, he's pretty nice
he's not
and
an
normal.
asshole.
Like, he's
He's fucked up, but he's not an asshole.
No, he's not. And I'm like, this is not my not my John.
Not my asshole, John Winchester.
No.
And in this episode, there's also a lot of like, we're talking about family. They pull the saving people hunting things line. Like, there's a lot about family.
I know John Winchester's saying that to his mother. He's like, saving people, hunting things. You know?
And I was like, oh, bro, what?
I was like, you're done.
You're done. And like, but there's a lot about like family and stuff like that. And at one point, he says something. I don't know if it's to Mary, who's always been a hunter or whatever. Like, oh, like who would do that to their kids or something? And I was
Mary
like,
says.
Oh, Mary. Yeah.
So Mary's like, who would do that to their kids? Who would make their kid live this life? And John's like, oh yeah, so true. I'm like, John, and you're a fugly bitch for that.
And it's like, and I hated you for that.
And we hate you for that.
Yeah, I looked into the camera like the fucking Office.
Yeah, no, we looked at each other. We exchanged a glance, and it was like, what the Okay, I do want to talk about, on a completely separate note, the 2 new additions to Supernatural.
Oh, they're so slay.
Latka and Carlos are their 2 new little besties. They're once again
gay besties.
I fear that they are the characters who I'm like, they do fall victim to that they are given very little to work with, so their performances are not stellar.
Yeah.
I do really like the idea of them, and the actors, I think they're slay.
We're judging them based on a pilot, though, and pilots are notoriously ass, so I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt here.
But one thing I do feel about Carlos, so Carlos is, like, bisexual.
Yeah, and they say it in the first, you're like, okay, Supernatural.
It's exciting, but it's also
Supernatural. That means he's gonna die. That does mean immediately that he's gonna die. But also, then the actor, I believe, is non-binary. So
they are non-binary. But for Carlos, they do that thing where when they introduce a bisexual character, he comes on. Latka is talking to him, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I can't believe I had a crush on Mary," and she's like, "Oh, because you were too busy making out with her ex-boyfriend." And he's like, "That I was." And I'm like, okay, the actor is doing what they can with what they are given, but like, why are you making it so tropey? Why are you making it so stereotypical of bisexual people being like, well, they just want to like make out with everyone? Like, why are you introducing this character and being like, he's a little slutty? Like, fuck, what are you doing?
Every other gay character in Supernatural is like that.
No, it's so I'm like, guys, please learn from your mistakes. I'm fucking begging you. I can't do this.
I'm so sorry, queen.
No, I'm like, Carlos, get out of there. Get out. Be on a different show. It's not too late for you to go to Riverdale.
The other piece of this is also that, like, we're like, okay, but they never do talk about their little besties. So, like, I do fear these besties are planned to die. And they're like, see, we added people of color into the show and gay people. And I'm like, yeah, but Supernatural, you do that all the time. And then you kill them. So does that...
And also, like, the way that they talk about this show, too, like, the production team and, like, Jensen and Danielle talk about it, because this is produced by Jensen and Danielle Ackles. The way I am obsessed with the way that they talk about that, like, yeah, we'd love to bring more characters into the show. And I'm like, that is fucking hilarious, because the idea of them having, like, a young Bobby, and then Bobby later on being like, yeah, I just didn't tell John about that. I just thought he forgot and, like, I just didn't say anything about it. He was just fucked in the head. Like,
yeah, that would be very funny if John was the one who lost all his memories, but nobody else.
No, literally, I'm like, it would be so fucking funny if John's like, yeah, no, it's so crazy. I'm learning how to hunt. And Bobby, like, post Mary's death, him being like, I need to learn how to hunt. It's so nice to meet you, Bobby. And Bobby's like, oh, he got Mary's death really set him in a weird way, when that's not at all what happened.
John Winchester getting Percy Jackson.
John.
It's a little Heroes of Olympus reference for, I just compared Bobby Singer to fucking Nico di Angelo. That's dark. That's so dark.
Also, they did mention, like, oh, we'd love to bring Misha back. First of all, they'd love to bring Misha back, but not Jared. So true. Second of all, the idea of bringing Misha back, because as we know, spoiler for later episodes of Supernatural, the vessel that Misha plays is like a vessel that Cass only got recently.
Yeah.
Like, in the Supernatural timeline. So if Cass was going to show up in the past, he wouldn't be in that same vessel. However, what this means to me, because we see Dean narrating at the end, this is how we get Destiel honeymoon road trip while Dean unpacks his parental trauma.
Could you imagine if that actually here's the problem.
No, I would no, Klaudia.
If this were October 2020, I would have been like, hey, how crazy would it be if that happened? But now I go, wait, there's a possibility of that happening.
Klaudia, I tell you right now, if that happens, I will take back everything negative that I have said about the Winchesters. I will be like, this is my favorite show. This is the only good show on television. Fuck League of Their Own. Fuck What We Do in the Shadows. Fuck, oh my God, what is it called? Fuck Good Omens. Fuck Our Flag Means Death. It's about the Winchesters.
No, literally, I fear that will be my November 2020 part 2. Like,
no, because that is going to be the new November 5th is when Dean and Cass kiss on screen in the Winchesters.
The fact that they're like, here's the straight romance between Dean's mom and dad, and we're like, okay, but when do we get to see him kiss the angel on the mouth in heaven? Because
I'm literally saying I don't imagine that we're going to be covering the Winchesters on this podcast unless something fucking crazy happens.
Yeah.
However, if Cass does show up in the Winchesters,
oh, I'll be insane.
I will become a fucking menace, and I will suddenly, because Dean is my boy. Dean's my homeboy, and I love him, but I don't know if I can sit through that every week.
Castiel is literally the patron saint of gay people, so.
No, he is, so I'm just saying. I do fear
that I am like my Catholic grandmother who like prays to certain saints for different things about Castiel. Like, I fear that he has made me regress back into like Catholicism, and that I'm like, so that's my little angel guy for gay people. It's quite, again, we always get sidetracked by Castiel. He's not actually here.
He's not in this, and I'm willing to bet he won't be. Like, no. There's little chance that he's gonna be in the show, but I do like the idea of Dean in his like flashbacks, like when it comes to him being like, yeah, well, I'm sorry, Cass and I are I'm in the doghouse. I said something a little bit, and he didn't like it, so he kicked me out for a couple days. I'm gonna be back, but I'm deciding to learn some stuff about my parents while I'm out.
And you're like, hello?
I'm just saying, if we get
that'll be it for me.
No, I need to know what is going on with Dean. That is the most compelling part of this show to me. Is the 30 seconds that we got at the end of Dean.
Yeah, I will also say the stuff with Mary Winchester is really interesting considering what we know happens with her later. Spoiler alert, she does get raised back from the dead. And becomes a bit of a MILF for a while. Yeah, she has
becomes.
Well, she's always been a MILF, but she then becomes a MILF. And her and Dean have a very interesting relationship. So, I get him being interested in finding out more about her. And she's very slay, all this kind of stuff. So I will say, seeing her be Yas and slay in this show is very cool, because I feel like the seasons where she was back on, they were very touch and go with the writing for her. I'm not gonna lie.
Because I also will say, I did not watch any of those episodes as they were on. I've read enough, I've lived vicariously through people on my Tumblr dash, as well as read some of the wiki.
It was not good.
I have an idea of what was happening, but not that much. So I'm first of all, I'm excited for what context this adds
a British
to that.
guy from the Men of Letters, and I was really happy for her.
Good for her.
Yeah, she was literally in her MILF era. I was like, okay, all right. But then the rest of the writing for her was a little. So I'm interested to see her. She's very I'm a strong, independent woman in the 70s. I will say there's a lot of the whole plot line, especially in the Winchesters, of John being so I was in Vietnam, and you're so a lot of people came back from Vietnam and their political outlook was changed, but it seems like yours wasn't.
He just seems like he did. Also, he enlisted himself.
Yeah.
He was I enlisted early to go because his dad left, and he was maybe if I go to Vietnam, I'll be able to find him.
Oh,
sure.
Daddy issues run in this family.
But I did see a theory on Twitter of someone being John says in the show, he finds this letter, someone gives him this letter and was oh, this is from your dad, and it's a letter to go to the Men of Letters bunker, the local bunker in Lawrence. But here's my question. Here's the theory I saw on Twitter. that was like, John does not really describe the man he saw, just that he was some guy. Someone was like, what if Dean is like, I'm gonna go time travel and I'm gonna give this letter to my dad?
Spoiler alert, time travel does exist in Supernatural.
I thought that was fucking hilarious. I'm like, if that is true, that is gonna be so fucking funny. The alternate universe, the fucking Marvel, the fucking Avengers Endgame-ification.
The world between worlds-ification.
The Ahsoka Tano-fication of Dean Winchester.
I mean, to be fair with Mary Winchester, she did get Ahsoka Tano'd.
She did.
Absolutely. And it was like, where's Ahsoka Tano? She comes back as a MILF, basically.
So true.
You know?
Yeah.
We're making references to so many things most of our listeners are not going to get.
This is just like Supernatural.
Oh my god, it's just like Comac Vitus for real.
Oh my god, what do you think Thrawn would think of the Winchesters? Anyway, do we have any final thoughts on the Winchesters? I will say, not very good writing.
No,
acting is not great.
It's a pilot. It's a pilot. So I'll give
it a chance. So far, not loving. However, those 30 seconds of Dean Winchester did make me feel a certain type of way in my brain.
Yeah, I will say also some of the lore, it might be a little fucked up because they say this in the trivia on the wiki, but I noticed this in the episode. When Mary exorcises a demon, she only has to say like a couple words to do the exorcism, but also the demon flies off, and usually when you exorcise a demon, you send it back to hell, and then it stays in hell for a bit.
Like, it can't just come right back.
Yeah, before it comes back. And in this, it just flew away and then went into another body, and I was like, that's not what happens.
No, that was my big thing, but I'm like, since when has Supernatural cared about its own lore?
Oh, also, I think something that supports your theory that this has to be in heaven is that the Samulet, which, spoiler alert for Supernatural, this amulet you see Dean wearing for the first couple of seasons, he does lose it eventually.
Yeah, okay.
For something. You see the Samulet is in the car.
It's hanging from
the window.
That was exactly my thought.
And you're like, this has gotta be in heaven.
Because isn't that in the car in heaven from the finale?
I don't know if we see it in the car.
I don't remember. To be fair,
let me pull up the finale.
No, you know what? And we'll leave that
mystery
for another time.
Yeah.
Right.
Also, the Impala has the original CAS 2Y5 license plate rather than the one it had ever since season 5,
or is it season 6?
Since the end of season 2.
Oh my god, really?
Yes.
Oh wow. Okay. Wow.
After that episode, the license plates were only ever seen again in flashbacks and when Dean drives the Impala through heaven.
Oh, this is... Guys,
you may be right.
We've cracked the fucking code. The Mystery Spotcast has you covered, guys. For your Winchester predictions, fuck the stock market. If I was to invest in stocks, I would be rich because of how good my prediction skills are.
Yeah. Oh, also, apparently they got some more lore wrong. Henry Winchester and the Men of Letters are stated to have disappeared 15 years ago. However, Abaddon's massacre of the Men of Letters was in 1958, which is only 14 years before 1972.
Oh my god, guys, you were off by 6 months. Fuck you.
Oh my god, I just remembered the Abaddon fucking plotline. That's so bad.
Oh no.
Apologies for talking about the Winchesters so much. Hopefully we won't have to talk about it every week. We will be here with the Winchesters Corner every week if something happens. We will bring you what you need to know because the motto of this show is we tell you things about Supernatural so that you don't have to go seek it out yourself because sadly they are important to the cultural conversation even though it makes you want to die actually consuming the content. So you'll hear it here first. We will be the reporters. We will be the people on the ground for you. But
we're fighting for you.
Yeah,
we're doing this for you.
Where's
our Pulitzer, honestly?
Yeah, we're the Stormwatch reporters. We're on the ground with the hurricane. That's us with the Winchesters right now.
We're recording this flying around in a tornado.
But thank you for listening. For more cursed supernatural content, you can follow us on social media at Mystery Spotcast on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. You can also ask us cursed supernatural questions in our TikTok Q&A, or by emailing them to us at themysteryspotcast@gmail.com. If you enjoyed listening to us suffer, please rate the show and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podchaser, Overcast, whatever app you use that allows for ratings and reviews. Please do that. It is very, very helpful. If you want to hear more from us, we are also two of the co-hosts of RuPaul's Pod Race, a queer Star Wars podcast. Our coverage of Andor has been very very slay. Shout out to there actually being queer characters in a Star Wars TV show. We're living, we're thriving. And we'll see you 2 Tuesdays from now for more slaying people, queer baiting things, the supernatural business.